The dining room felt colder than usual. The clinking of my mother's best silverware was the only sound. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Mom," I began, my voice barely steady. "Why wasn't I told about Dad's will reading?" My mother, Margaret, placed her fork down with a sharp click. Her eyes, the same shade of blue as mine, held no warmth. "Anna, we've been over this. It was for family." My brother, Ethan, shifted in his seat, looking intently at his plate. "I am family." "That," I insisted, my voice trembling. She looked at me, a cold, dismissive stare I knew too well. "You chose failure. You left a promising career to play nurse. You lost your husband. You have nothing. You are not part of this family anymore." The words hung in the air, final and brutal. My own fork shook in my hand. The silence from Ethan and his wife was a betrayal all its own. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. "I see." I walked out, my vision blurring. On the perfectly manicured lawn, a bright red "for sale" sign was stabbed into the grass. I drove away, the steering wheel cold beneath my grip. Tears finally fell, hot and angry. Memories flooded me. Christmas mornings by the big fireplace. My dad, James, teaching me how to paint the porch swing a cheerful yellow. The smell of his pipe tobacco lingering in his workshop. That house was my anchor, my sanctuary. Now, it felt like a ghost. I knew why it was being sold. My father's illness had drained their savings. The medical bills and reverse mortgage had finally caught up. My mother's pride wouldn't let her ask for help, especially not from me. She would rather sell our history than admit she was struggling. I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror, my heart aching. A quiet, fierce determination ignited within me. I didn't know how, but one day I would buy that house back. I would reclaim the home they were so carelessly throwing away. My life had become a series of small rooms and quiet struggles. I'd left my corporate marketing job 5 years ago to care for Dad. My then-husband, Tom, had called it a career suicide. He said I was being emotional and irresponsible. We divorced a year later. He kept the modern apartment. I kept my dignity and a mountain of debt. My mother and Ethan had agreed with him. "You threw it all away for a lost cause," Ethan had said, his voice dripping with scorn. A real adult plans for the future. Now I was 36, living in a tiny apartment, working as an administrative assistant at a small real estate office. I was the family's cautionary tale. A letter arrived from a mortgage company. I opened it with trembling hands. The family home was going to a public auction in 6 months. The clock was ticking. I was hunched over my laptop at a corner table in the Daily Grind, the local coffee shop, trying to make sense of the auction paperwork. The bell on the door jingled. I looked up and saw my brother Ethan swagger in with a friend. They took the table right behind me. "Yeah, the old place is going to auction," Ethan said, his voice loud and confident. "I've got an in with the auctioneer. I'll buy it cheap, flip it, and make a killing. Finally, I can fix it up the way it should have been all along. Get rid of all that old clutter." His friend laughed. I sat perfectly still, my blood running cold. His smugness was a physical blow. He wasn't saving our home. He was seeing it as a bargain to be exploited. That was the final push I needed. That night, I buried myself in research, studying every auction rule and regulation I could find. My job at Oakwood Realty was mundane. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was a man who loved the sound of his own voice and often gave me condescending smiles. "Fetch the coffee, Anna," he'd say, as if I were 20 instead of 36. But I did it all with a quiet smile. I absorbed everything. I listened to the agents negotiate on the phone. I studied the property listings and the fine print on contracts. I learned about comps, liens, and zoning laws. While I filed paperwork, I was getting an education. One afternoon, I overheard Mr. Henderson with a client talking about hidden value in the older homes on my very street. "Those houses from the 50s, the client said, were built with materials you can't find today. There's gold in those old neighborhoods." He was talking about my house. An elegant older woman with sharp eyes and silver hair walked into the office. She introduced herself as Eleanor Keating. "I'm looking for some tax documents for a property I sold years ago," she said. I knew exactly where to find them. As I handed her the folder, she looked at my nameplate. "Anna? James's daughter?" I nodded, surprised. Her expression softened. "Your father was a good man. We were friends for years. He was so proud of you." Her words felt like a balm. We started talking, and I cautiously mentioned my interest in the auction. She leaned in. "Let me buy you a coffee sometime. There are strategies most people don't know about." She became my mentor. One afternoon, she sketched out a process on a napkin. "A pre-foreclosure bid," she whispered. "You can make a direct offer before the auction, but you have to be clever." Swallowing my pride, I went to see my mother. The for sale sign looked even more glaring. I found her in the garden, pruning roses with a vicious intensity. "Mom," I said softly, "I know about the auction. Maybe I can help. We could find a way to keep it in the family." She didn't even look up. "You? Help? Don't be absurd, Anna. You can't even afford your rent on that pathetic salary. This house needs real money. Ethan understands that." Ethan appeared in the doorway, smirking. "Dreaming again, Anna?" He chuckled. My face burned. I turned to leave, the hope in my chest withering. As I reached my car, I heard her voice float through the kitchen window. "I just want to erase every trace of her from this home." The words were a final, brutal nail in the coffin of our relationship. At work, I noticed a discrepancy in a closing statement prepared by a senior agent. A costly error was about to go through. Instead of making a scene, I quietly pulled Mr. Henderson aside and showed him the numbers. His eyes widened. He fixed it immediately, saving the agency a major lawsuit. The next Monday, he called me into his office. "That was sharp work, Anna. I'm promoting you to Junior Transaction Coordinator. A small raise, but it's a start." It was the first piece of good news in years. It wasn't a fortune, but it was validation. Mrs. Keating called me that evening. "There's a local investor meetup tomorrow night," she said. "Wear something professional. It's time you met the people who can teach you how to play this game." For the first time, a path forward seemed possible. I dove in headfirst. I attended the investor meetings with Mrs. Keating, listening more than I spoke. I took online courses on real estate investment in the evenings. On weekends, I took side gigs staging homes for other agents, learning how to see a property's potential. I saved every extra dollar. My social life was non-existent. My apartment was sparse, but with every passing week, my knowledge and my savings grew. The humiliation of the family dinner and my brother's smugness fueled my discipline. I was no longer the helpless daughter. I was a student of the game. Mrs. Keating helped me decipher the auction timelines. "The buyer registration list for your childhood home," she informed me one day, pointing at a date on her calendar, "opens in exactly 3 months." I had a deadline. My cousin Maya's engagement party was a lavish affair. I wore a simple dress I'd owned for years. Margaret and Ethan arrived in expensive new clothes, holding court. "Oh, the house?" Margaret said loudly to a group of aunts. "Ethan has such wonderful plans for it, a complete modernization." People congratulated them. I was invisible, a ghost at the feast. I stood by the punch bowl, listening. "We'll finally gut the whole thing," Ethan announced, swirling his drink. "Start from scratch. That dusty old workshop at the back will be the first to go. Finally erase Dad's ugly old hobby room." A few people laughed. I didn't. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. They had no idea what they were truly throwing away. Their arrogance was their blindness. With Mrs. Keating's guidance, I moved quickly. We set up a simple trust with a generic name, Apex Holdings. The name meant nothing, but to me, it represented the peak I was climbing. Through the trust, we submitted a formal, pre-auction offer directly to the mortgage company. It was a bold, all-cash bid, just slightly above the minimum required. The waiting was agony. Every ring of my phone made me jump. Then the email arrived. I opened it, my hands shaking. The subject line read, "Offer accepted." My breath caught in my throat. The family home was mine. Well, it was Apex Holdings's. The sale was contingent on me producing the full payment within 60 days. I had the house, but now I needed the money. The 60-day clock was a ticking time bomb in my head. My promotion and savings weren't enough. I needed a miracle. I remembered a small, dilapidated bungalow Mrs. Keating had mentioned was a good candidate for a quick flip. I poured all my knowledge into it, finding a motivated seller and a hungry contractor. I negotiated a deal. I would manage the entire project for a percentage of the profit. I spent every free moment there, coordinating repairs, choosing paint, and staging it perfectly. It sold in 2 weeks. When the profit was calculated, my share was transferred directly to the Apex Holdings account. It was just enough. The funds cleared with only days to spare before the public auction. The house was legally mine. Auction day was crisp and sunny. I stood at the back of the small crowd gathered on the courthouse steps. I saw my mother and Ethan at the front, dressed confidently, bidding paddles in hand. Ethan looked smug, already the victor. The auctioneer called the property. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a unique situation. This property, 1847 Maple Drive, has been purchased in a private pre-auction sale. It is no longer available." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Margaret's face went slack with shock. Ethan's turned a furious red. "What? Who?" he sputtered to his mother. "Who would have bought that old wreck?" I calmly walked past them, the deed safe in my bag, the envelope crisp against my side. I used my new key to open the front door. The house was silent and empty, smelling of dust and memories. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was mine. I walked through each room, my footsteps echoing. Finally, I pushed open the door to my father's workshop. It was exactly as he'd left it. Tools hung neatly on the pegboard. The scent of wood and oil was a comforting embrace. I ran my hand over his old workbench and found a small hidden drawer I remembered from childhood. Inside was a single yellowed piece of paper. In my father's familiar looping handwriting, it read, "For my Anna. This house, and all the love in it, will always belong to you." I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. "I did it, Dad." I whispered into the quiet room. I came home. A furious pounding on the front door shattered the silence. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and answered it. Margaret and Ethan stood on the porch, their faces contorted with anger. "What are you doing here?" Margaret demanded. "The new owner could have you arrested." "I am the new owner," I said, my voice steady. The color drained from their faces. Ethan looked like he'd been punched. "You? How?" he stammered. Margaret recovered first, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "You tricked us," she spat, her voice venomous. I looked at her, my expression calm. "No, Mother," I replied. "I learned from you." I saw the shock of my words hit her. I had finally stopped their noise. They tried to rally, their shock turning to manipulation. "Your father would be sickened by this," Margaret hissed, "turning your own family out of their home. This was never your home to sell, Mom. You were going to let Ethan gut it. I'm restoring it in Dad's honor. I'm preserving his memory, which is more than you were doing." My words were quiet but firm. Ethan stepped forward, his finger jabbing the air near my face. "You'll regret this, Anna. You'll regret making enemies of your own family." There was a desperate threat in his voice. I didn't flinch. A small, serene smile touched my lips. I had the law, the deed, and my father's blessing on my side. Their anger was powerless. The renovation began. It was my therapy. I painted walls, sanded floors, and polished fixtures. I didn't hire a crew. I did the work myself, learning as I went. I turned the pain of the past into purpose for the future. Neighbors would stop by, offering words of encouragement. "Your father would be so proud," old Mr. Miller from next door said, watching me repair the porch swing. The house slowly came back to life, filled with light and care. It was no longer a museum of hurtful memories, but a canvas for my new beginning. A developer knocked on my door one afternoon. "Heard what you did here. It's beautiful. I'll offer you triple what you paid. Cash." It was a life-changing amount of money. I looked at my home, my father's workshop, my porch swing. "It's not for sale," I said, and closed the door. Karma, it seemed, was keeping a ledger. Ethan's business, a flashy tech startup built on debt and bravado, collapsed. The bad investments he'd boasted about had crippled him. He went to Margaret, begging for a loan from the money she'd expected from the house sale. But that money was gone. Her savings were tied up, and without the profit from my house, she couldn't help him. Their golden future tarnished overnight. I heard the news through Mrs. Keating, who heard it at the beauty parlor. The arrogance that had defined them was replaced by a frantic fear. The consequences of their actions were finally knocking at their own door, and they had no one to blame but themselves. A violent spring storm tore through town. I watched it from my safe, sturdy window. The next day, I heard that Ethan's modern townhouse had sustained significant roof damage. His insurance claim was denied due to a clause about improper shingles he'd used to cut costs. With no money for repairs and a newborn baby, his family needed a place to stay immediately. The only suitable available rental in the area, as his frantic wife discovered, was the fully furnished guest house attached to my property. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. His wife Chloe called me, her voice thick with tears. "Anna, please," she pleaded. "We have nowhere else to go." I wrestled with my conscience. Revenge felt sweet, but their baby was innocent. I couldn't be as cruel as they had been. I agreed to rent the guest house to them. I drew up a formal lease with a local property manager as an intermediary. The rent was fair market value, not a penny more, not a penny less. It was a business transaction, not a family favor. When Margaret found out, she stormed over. "How dare you humiliate your brother like this, making him your tenant?" she screamed, her face purple with rage. I stood calmly on my porch, looking down at her. "No, Mother," I replied, my voice even. "I'm not humiliating him. I'm helping his family survive. It's more than you ever did for me." She was speechless. Weeks passed in an uneasy truce. I'd see Ethan hurry from his car to the guest house, avoiding my eyes. Margaret started appearing, always when I was gardening or painting the trim. She'd just stand by the fence, watching. The anger on her face was slowly being replaced by something else, confusion and maybe a flicker of guilt. She saw the care I put into every detail, the love I was pouring into the home she had been so eager to sell. One afternoon after she had left, I found a small, faded photograph tucked into the fence post. It was a picture of her and my father, young and smiling, with me as a toddler on his shoulders. It was not an apology, but it was the closest she had ever come to one. I showed the photo to Mrs. Keating. She sighed, a knowing look in her eyes. "Your father was a wise man, Anna. He knew your mother's pride and her favoritism. He told me years ago, if Margaret ever drives Anna out, you tell her the house was meant to be hers. The paperwork is there." He tried to change the will, but he passed before it was final. The pieces clicked into place. My fight wasn't just my own. It was the fulfillment of my father's last wish. The poetic justice I had orchestrated was, in a way, written by his hand from the start. He had believed in me when no one else did. A profound sense of peace settled over me. I knew what I had to do. I decided to host one last family dinner. The dining room was full again, but the air was thick with tension. My mother, Ethan, Chloe, and their baby were there. I had cooked my father's favorite pot roast. We ate in near silence, the clinking of forks unbearably loud. After dessert, I stood up. "You all told me I didn't belong here," I began, my voice clear. "You said I was a failure. You tried to erase me from this family. But I made my own place. I built myself back up, and I fought for this house." I looked at each of them. "This is my home now." I then picked up a simple folder from the sideboard and handed it to my mother. Her hands trembled as she took it. Margaret opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the document inside. It was a copy of a newly filed deed, but it was based on an old, attached affidavit from my father. It named me, Anna, as the sole heir and legal caretaker of the family estate. His original intent clearly stated. It wasn't about the money or the fight anymore. It was about legacy. Her face crumpled. The stern, cold mask she had worn for years shattered. A sob escaped her lips. He always meant for it to be you," she whispered, the truth finally breaking her. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not a critic, but my mother, frail and regretful. She finally understood that I was never the failure. I was my father's daughter. That evening, I walked through the quiet house as the sun set, casting long, golden shadows. The renovation was complete. It was more beautiful than ever, a perfect blend of its history and my future. On the mantel, a photo of my father smiled, his eyes kind. In the quiet guest house, my brother and his family were living in the shadow of the home they had tried to take from me. My mother's pride was finally humbled. They once told me I wasn't part of this family. Now I owned every memory they tried to erase. The house was silent, but it was no longer empty. It was full of peace, and it was finally, completely my home.